enough nuclear power to destroy the human race several times over.
I need to show you a video that is blowing my mind. You have the ocean just sitting there being nice and calm, and then this pops out. Boom! It doesn't just pop out, it pops out for a second and it looks like it's just about to fall back down, and then this is a rocket. Yes, a full-blown rocket that is headed for space. Oh, and I know this kind of looks small. It's not small. And where is this rocket being launched from? Are there underwater bases? Yes, they're called submarines. Once it gets to the surface, it flies 1,000 kilometers above Earth, literally into space. It starts looking at the stars to navigate and eventually falls back down to Earth, traveling up to like 12,000 kilometers to hit whatever target the people who launched it wanted it to. Like, what have we created?
With such destructive power, it threatened the world. A deadly game of stealth.
An undeniable strategic deterrent.
Nuclear warheads that can wipe out countries.
Submarines are f***ing cool, I just gotta say it. They're these massive floating nuclear weapons that could be anywhere at any time that we use for psychological warfare and actual warfare and spying on people. And because of this, these giant vessels are actually incredibly stealthy. Like, you could be swimming in the ocean one day, minding your own business, and right below you, there could literally be this massive 48,000-ton metal machine with a couple hundred humans aboard, equipped with nuclear warheads that could be launched at a moment's notice. And you would have no idea, because not being seen is kind of their whole MO, which is nuts because these are some big boys. Like Russia's Typhoon-class submarine. If you just pluck that out of the water and put it on land somewhere, you start to get a scale for how massive this thing is. Like a floating building. Yeah, these guys are thick. And they're cruising around our oceans, 250 meters below the surface. Oh, and something we're gonna talk about later, they literally have nuclear power plants on board, giving them basically unlimited energy to make fresh water and oxygen, which means they could be down here in the depths of the ocean for decades. That is, if there weren't humans aboard that needed to come up to eat food. Navies around the world who have submarines do everything in their power to ensure that these subs are quiet and invisible, even magnet resistant, all in the name of being undetectable. And they're always out there. Right now, in this very moment, there are tons of these things. There are humans on these multi-story buildings that are floating around our oceans with giant weapons in them. This is not normal. How did we get here? Why were these things invented? There's a lot to understand about submarines. There's a lot of angles we have been researching for months. And today, we are going to show you how we got here, what submarines can do, and most importantly, why?
One submarine has enough nuclear weapons to essentially end life on the planet as we know it. Just one submarine.
An increase in submarine activity.
Russian rearming their fleet, Chinese submarines, Iranian submarines.
They will preserve peace for many years to come.
Boy, today's topic is so juicy and there is so much to get through. Nick, our studio manager, is building something for today's topic. Okay, Nick, what are you up to? Oh.
Yeah, it's coming together.
Look at this model, oh my God.
Yeah, it's the SSBN Andrew Jackson Lafayette class. As you can see, all the pieces are out everywhere.
And these are the people. Look at the people, oh my God.
If you look up here in the front, these are the bunks. These are the torpedoes.
Okay, we will check in with Nick in a moment as that model gets built. Let me tell you how we got here. People have been building boats to try to go underwater for a very long time. Like, look at this old art where you can see Alexander the Great going completely underwater in a big glass barrel. This is like 2,000 years ago. 1,800 years later, you have Leonardo da Vinci, who was busy literally thinking of anything that could be invented, and he sketched up his very own version of an underwater boat. This beauty right here. It was basically like a big mechanical fish. Oh, and, this is wild, he kept these sketches a secret because he feared, quote, the evil nature of men who practice assassination at the bottom of the sea. Like, he thought that we might use these underwater boats for war. Whoops. Anyway, The first known boat to actually navigate underwater was, of course, built by a Dutch dude. Dutch, man, they're just so good at water. 150 years later, over here in what was soon to be the United States, George Washington paid for this sucker to be made for his army. I mean, there could be a whole video about this boat, the Turtle. Because it kind of looked like two turtle shells put together. So cute. The guy in there is just like so cozy. They tried to use the Turtle in their war for freedom against the British, but it never really did anything useful, and then it just sank. I mean, cool name, but wasn't a super useful submarine. But it paved the way. 50 years later, we have the American Civil War, where the Confederate rebels built a sub that was powered by a bunch of guys manually turning a crank. And on board, it had a long spar torpedo. Don't be fooled though, spar torpedo was just a fancy way of saying a bomb on a 15-foot stick. And they actually used it. They snuck up on a Yankee ship underneath it with their bomb stick in the middle of the Civil War and blew it up, and both sides sank. Like the submarine sank too. Like it didn't work. I mean, it kind of worked, but it just didn't really work. Anyway, I had to mention all of these like early submarines because they kind of laid the groundwork. But in the 1800s, things get really serious. Thanks to this guy over here in Germany, Rudolf Diesel invented an engine that changed everything. This new engine mixed pressure and air and fossil fuels that all exploded and made things move. This changed a lot of industries, but the Germans were like, let's put these in submarines and run them to charge a bunch of batteries that we can use to power the sub while we're underwater. It's a lot better than the hand crank, and indeed it was. But there was one big problem, which is that this engine needs air. Like it needs to be able to pump out the exhaust that it makes, and it needs to be able to suck in air to like make energy. So you can't actually run your engines underwater. So these German subs, as stealthy as they were still very limited because they could only stay underwater for like 48 hours max before having to come up and give away their position so that they could get air for their engines. This is a problem that will soon be solved, but we just need a few wars first. It's the 1900s, we have all these big empires that are looking for ways to destroy themselves with their new industrial technology, and they're getting good at submarines. They're loading them up with more and more batteries. Now they have sonar and radar capabilities so that they can like see underwater. And they have radios and encryption devices so they can talk to each other while they're underwater, which is everything when you're fighting a war. The Germans call these submarines Unterseeboats or U-boats, and they use them for their new plan of unrestricted submarine warfare, which is a sterile way of just saying we feel comfortable sneaking up on civilian boats and sinking them and killing the people without notice because we've decided we are literal villains.
Submarines aim and fire their deadly torpedoes and always over them is the threat of sudden attack in the face of enemy submarines.
So yeah, being used for horrible means, but let's be clear, this is amazing technology. Like this is light years ahead of the forefathers of submarines like the Turtle or that poorly thought out bomb on a stick thing from the Civil War. But they still have the limitation of air. They need to come up all the time to get air for their engines. No matter how scary and stealthy they could become and sneaking around underwater during these wars, they still have to come up to the surface every 48 hours to run their engines and recharge their batteries, giving away their sneaky position and becoming way less effective as a war tool. This would be like playing Battleship, but every few turns you have to flip your board around to show your opponent where you are for a sec. They kind of figured this out a little bit when they started to use these two little tubes that allowed them to kind of still be underwater, but to like put the tubes up and suck down air from the surface, push out exhaust, but it's kind of rubbish. Like having to run your noisy engines every 48 hours was a huge limitation on how useful these subs could be. Well, of course, the war ends. Germany loses and surrenders. And some of these U-boats that were just sitting there were divvied up among the winners, the US, the UK, and the USSR, who discovered that, wow, the Germans have some amazing submarine tech. Let's use this tech to pimp out our own subs, leapfrogging decades of development. And this is where things get juicy and scary. So now you have these two former allies, the US and the Soviet Union, looking at each other with skepticism. They both got their hands on this German tech, and they both know that the other got their hands on this German tech, and they both secretly are like, we need to get way better than the other at submarine tech. Let's go. This was a huge priority, but it was also weird and hush-hush. The Cold War. This begins an era of secretive investment into submarine technology, and this is where they level up to blow all of our minds, where submarines become the impossibly advanced machines that we know today. Something that changed everything here was that humans had learned to tinker with atoms, breaking them apart to make incredible amounts of energy, and they used that energy to blow things up, but also to make electricity, and crucially, nuclear energy didn't require air. So it's the 1950s, and you got this guy. He's a Russian-born American Navy guy named Hyman Rickover. And he was like, whoa, wait a second. You're telling me that you can make electricity, but you don't need air? Light bulbs going off on this guy's head because he's a submarine guy. And he's like, let's slap these puppies into submarines. That would solve all of our needing to come up to the surface every couple of hours problem. The US government's like, wait, sorry, what did you say, Rickover? And Rickover's like, I said, let's put the nuclear power plant inside of the submarine. We got to get ahead of the Soviets. He got a lot of pushback for this for obvious reasons, but he dug his heels in, leapfrogging all the bosses till he got to the chief of Navy operations and whispered in his ear his big idea, and it totally worked. The story of how this went down is insane, and Rickover was insane and visionary, and I'll leave some reading in the sources for those who want to go down that rabbit hole. Whew. Throwing a lot of discipline here, just like breezing over this guy's story. But yes, it's the 50s and the US government set about trying to put a full-blown nuclear reactor, a power plant, inside of their giant floating weapon. And they did, somehow, and it changed everything.
The arrival of nuclear power has broken those bonds.
Can go around the world on a core of uranium only slightly larger than a golf ball.
She may have just as profound an effect on naval strategy as the airplane has had on war.
Let's see how Nick's doing with his model. Oh, here we go. Look at this big boy.
Here she is.
Wow. I am going to put this model on my desk and look at it every day because it's beautiful and it's like retro, which is kind of cool. Anyway, let's get back to the story here because the next chapter here is really the chapter that matters most. Once they got the nuclear reactor onto these subs, everything changed. I'm going to show you why. So look at this big old submarine. It's a Sturgeon-class submarine from the 60s. It's a US Navy sub. And look, back here we've got the nuclear reactor. It sits back here doing its thing, breaking atoms apart, which produces an enormous amount of heat that can heat up water, that turns this massive propeller, and remember that spinning things gives you power, electricity. Boom, you're spinning turbines and now you have electricity for your submarine. Not only does the nuclear reactor not need air to work, but it literally creates air. After all, it's surrounded by H2O, so all it needs to do is break the two H's from the O and boom, you've got oxygen for your crew to breathe. I mean, this nuclear reactor was magic. Move over, trees. We've got submarines. And they use all of this abundant energy to get rid of salt in the water, so now the crew has like drinking water and can take showers while they're floating hundreds of meters under the ocean. Like, this is becoming really insane. The nuclear reactor solved all the problems. Remember how diesel submarines had to refuel all the time and they had to come up to the surface to run their engines and get rid of their exhaust and suck in the air? Nuclear submarines could now run underwater without needing to refuel for 20 years. Oh, that is, if you don't count having to refuel the humans on board. So Rickover was right. Nuclear reactors on submarines changed everything. They are now way more useful. You can now sneak around the ocean and never give away your position. Okay, so now that we can be underwater for basically ever, let's load these suckers up with big weapons. These suckers are getting huge by like the 70s and 80s. I mean, here was the German U-boat. Remember the one, like the thing that like really like pushed it all forward? And here is an American Cold War era submarine, the Ohio class. This thing is massive. Like, zoom in here. Those are people. Here's their kitchen. Here's the reactor back here doing all of its magic. And look, here's where the crew sleeps. Oh, and what are they sleeping next to? What are all these tubes doing here? Oh. These tubes, kind of right where the crew is sleeping, yeah, these tubes are what make the submarine maybe the most important weapon to have ever existed. This is where the nukes are. Well, technically, we don't know that this is where the nukes are, and any submariner will vehemently tell you that, quote, we cannot confirm or deny whether or not the missiles inside of these silos carry nuclear weapons. Wink, wink. This is where the nukes are. So, what started as two superpowers nerding out about German submarine tech in the 40s turned into an arms race that resulted in both of them figuring out how to power their subs with nuclear reactors and the ability to load up these subs with 24 rockets that they could launch to the edge of space at any moment carrying multiple nuclear warheads. Like, having nuclear weapons on land ready to fire is pretty cool. Having them on planes is pretty powerful, but you can see both of those things. When you have a sub quietly roving around the world's oceans with the ability to carry a bunch of nuclear weapons and to launch them at any point, you've just achieved the most powerful advantage in military strategy. Surprise. The panopticon. Your enemy has no idea where you are, but they know you are somewhere, in range at all times, so they have to act as if you are everywhere, a few button presses away from launching one of these things. But this psychological sort of mind game only works if you are never noticed. So the next phase of this technological evolution of submarines focuses on silence. They start coating their submarines with rubber tiles so that the sonar doesn't bounce off as well. They took these giant propellers that, yes, are massive, bigger than you can imagine, and made them impossibly quiet. And even on the inside, they started taking crazy precautions. Like, all the heavy gear in a submarine is mounted on rubber pads to dampen any vibration that could be detected or heard. The cooks even started putting rubber on everything, like their mixing bowls and their mixing spatulas are all like sound deadening materials so that they don't send out vibration and make noise. The submarine force is serious about silence. In fact, they take pride in calling themselves the Silent Service. And there's kind of a chip on their shoulder because they don't get nearly as much recognition as like these guys do. They're just like lurking in the depths of the ocean doing like a really important defense thing, and no one knows about them because literally that's their job, is to never be noticed. Wow. So you have the US and the Soviet Union, both with the ability to launch nukes from their submarines. And ironically, this whole everyone pointing a gun at each other thing actually keeps these great powers from ever fighting a war with each other. They were both too afraid of how easy it would be for the other to strike back with their stealthy subs, ensuring the destruction of both sides. This is deterrence, and it is one of the major forces keeping great powers from going to war with each other. It's why the US has an entire fleet of subs with no other mission than to go into the ocean and just disappear, and just sit there, silently ready to make good on their threat that if you attack us, we are always ready to respond. Submarines are also really good for spying. Okay, so we know by now that a lot of communication in this world is made possible because of underwater cables. It's not just the internet, these cables have existed for a very long time, and they're just sitting there at the bottom of the ocean connecting the whole world. And they're safe because no one has access to them. No one's gonna go to the very bottom of the ocean. Oh wait, submarines. Submarines have unique access to these cables. So it's the early 1970s, and American intelligence agencies team up with the Navy to have them scour the ocean floor looking for Russian communication cables, with the idea that they could tap into the cables and listen to them. And lo and behold, they found one. 120 meters below the surface, over in this eastern part of Russia, they found a cable that connected two Soviet naval bases. And they put a literal tape recorder into the cable, and now they are literally listening to Soviets talking to each other about all sorts of military things. None of it is encrypted in any way because no one expected them to dive down and find this cable. Oh, and they were really clever. They sort of only loosely attached it to the cable in case they like needed to pull up the cable for maintenance or something. The little device would fall off and no one would ever know that they were being spied on. But the tapes that were recording like filled up, so divers had to go down and retrieve the recording device and take out the tapes and put in new tapes, and they did that like every month. And they were like, we will never get caught for this. But then eventually they did. It turns out that an NSA employee got paid $35,000 from the Soviets to tell them about this operation. Anyway, that would be an amazing movie. Someone please make that spy movie. The fact is that subs still do a lot of spying. They will often have Navy SEALs aboard that are ready to dive and do ... redacted. We have no idea. Like, we have literally no idea what they do, for obvious reasons. There is evidence that the US and UK spy agencies still tap into cables, like the undersea fiber optic cables that like govern the internet, and that they do this all the time. See Edward Snowden's big leak and some deep dive into that. I'm not going to go into it, but we know that submarines spy. We know that countries are always spying on each other. This should not be surprising. In fact, during the research for this video, I felt the insatiable desire to dive down the rabbit hole of how submarines spy. And I didn't, because I'm trying to stay disciplined and I'm trying to tell this story, but leave a comment if you want me to make that video and I will consider it, because there is a lot more about that topic. Let's move on. Okay, so let's get up to speed. Where are we today with submarines? According to the US Navy's website, the US has 71 submarines. 53 of them are fast attack subs, and 14 are the ballistic missile subs that sit there and be our deterrent, and 4 are guided missile subs. But then there's other sources that say that there's only 68 submarines. I don't know. All of this is like classified and we're not supposed to know, and no one's supposed to know, but we know a lot, but not specifics. And like I mentioned, all of these subs have very different capabilities. Fast attack subs, for example, are optimized for closer attacks. They use a lot of cruise missiles, which are launched through these big tubes and have jet engines and computer brains for navigation. They're way more precise, but they can still go pretty far. I mean, we're talking like 2,400 kilometers away, 800 kilometers an hour. Like, they're still very, very effective long-term weapons.
Russia says it launched 26 cruise missiles today.
59 Tomahawk cruise missiles have hit a Syrian airbase,
launching dozens of missiles targeting the Syrian regimes.
But again, the one that like represents the mind-blowing reality of what we humans have invented is this sucker, the Ohio-class submarine. They do have torpedoes and several other sort of smaller scale weapons, but it's these tubes that are carrying missiles, which are carrying warheads, that are the big defining game changer of this technology. So let me just break down the journey of these rockets. They can hit targets that are upwards of 6,400 kilometers away. That's like wider than the entire United States, and probably a lot longer, but of course the Navy won't tell us these things because it's all classified. And they don't just carry like one nuclear warhead, they can carry multiple. And they're not all just going to one place, they actually get dropped at different locations. How? An unbelievable amount of scientific ingenuity. Let me explain. It starts at the boost phase, where the missile gets its initial oomph, gets pushed out of the water, up into the air, goes up into the sky, gets a bunch of momentum, and then the engines cut, and the missile just has momentum, and it starts to fly just using the laws of physics. It's literally at the edge of space. We're now in the mid-course phase. The missile then just starts casually looking at the stars to calibrate its position, and then making little micro adjustments to make sure that it is perfectly on course for its target. And this is where we need to talk about warheads. No, not those. These little cones that aren't that little are warheads, the most powerful weapons humans have ever created. These missiles can have up to 12 of these cone-shaped warheads. They're just hanging out on the front tip of this rocket. Eventually, this missile reaches its highest point and starts to come down. At this phase, the missile starts spitting out the warheads, just at the right time, just at the right velocity, and as they re-enter Earth's atmosphere, they start hurtling towards their targets, as far as 1,500 kilometers apart. So like roughly the distance between Iceland and Norway. And then, when they get where they were programmed to go, I mean, you know what happens. Oh, but that happens potentially 12 times from this one rocket. Each one of these explosions being roughly 6 times more powerful than the bombs dropped on Japan at the end of World War II. Okay, so that was one missile. This submarine can hold 24 missiles. Like, what have we created? Luckily, since World War II, no one has had to use nuclear weapons in any conflict. We've had a lot of threats lately, but luckily they just remain a deterrent force and not an actual thing that we use. Hopefully it stays that way. And yes, several countries have the ability to load these things onto their floating weapons called submarines that are lurking in the depths of the ocean at all times, spying and just sitting there. Okay, so that's submarines. Well, no, that's like a teaspoon of submarines. This topic could go on forever. I mean, seriously, this was a painful story to do because there was so much I had to leave on the table. I have a feeling that I'm going to be making a few more videos about submarines soon. But let's just remember what we've learned here. We humans have invented something pretty wild. Something that should be impossible. The ability for a bunch of us to live underwater in these floating buildings for months at a time. We load these things up with enough firepower to turn entire countries to dust, all in the name of never having to use them. That is the paradox of modern conflict. And yet, the thing I'm taking away from having spent a lot of time thinking about submarines is that humans can kind of do whatever they put their minds to. Making power out of nuclear fission and putting that into an underwater weapon? Like what? Shooting rockets into space? Having them look at the stars and then land wherever they want to? Humans did this. We did it because of fear and skepticism and conflict. We did this to get ahead, to be more powerful. But we did this. And that, in some weird way, gives me hope that someday, when the best minds aren't directed to the priorities of power and conflict, we humans will continue to make magic happen. Magic that helps more and more people live better lives, making impossible things possible. Thank you for watching my video on submarines. What you're not looking at right now is all the props we have that were just sort of like in the background, blurred out, but they're super cool. Hold on. Look at this model of the USS West Virginia. You can see the little silos up here for the nukes. All these guys. What I didn't tell you is that my father-in-law is actually the captain of a submarine, one of the SSBNs. So I had some major insider info that I've been learning about for literally a decade, and that helped spur this video on. I am getting more and more excited about the community we're building over at the newsroom. The newsroom is what we call our Patreon. It just sounds way cooler to call it the newsroom. We have a community of people that we ask for feedback on things, for advice on things. We have live streams. I just did a live stream with the community. It was really cool. You also get an extra video every month. It's a behind the scenes vlog of how we make what we make here in the studio. You meet the people, the team, you see the processes, you see the shenanigans. It's a good time. And you also get the fuzzy feeling that you are supporting independent journalism here on YouTube. So go check that out, patreon.com/Johnny Harris. We have LUTs and presets, which help you color your videos and photos. We have a lot more videos. If you're new around here, subscribe to the channel because we publish a lot lately. Like, as the team has grown, we just publish tons of videos now, which is fun and kind of stressful sometimes. And that's all we have. I've reached the end of what we have to give to you, and now I am done telling you what I can give to you. What can you give to me? Okay, I'm done. Bye. Thank you, everyone.